And Rob, interesting story. We both, talked about it earlier. We picked the Clippers to win the championship this past season. And obviously they didn't. And they actually went out with a whimper. They were up 3-1 on the Denver Nuggets in the second round, lose 3 straight games. And not only that, but 3 straight games in which they had double-digit leads in every one of the games. I mean, it was bad. It was bad. And anyway, of course, now that they've lost, there are all these stories coming out. And I have been told different things within the last few months, and I've talked about them on this show and on TV and stuff, about a lot of stuff I'd heard with chemistry issues and some guys being upset and culture being different and all that. And so a lot of it was just encapsulated in a story that came out a few days ago in The Athletic. Really good story. A guy that has been on the show before, Jovan Buha, and did a great job with it. But Rob G, give us a few of some of the things that, in a nutshell, their culture was the little engine that could. My phrase. But, this team of overachievers, hard workers, people didn't expect much from them, and they go ahead and not only make the playoffs a couple years ago, but took 2 games off the Golden State Warriors. And their culture was just hard work. Every minute of every game, you're giving it your all. And no prima donnas or anything. And then you bring in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and those two got special treatment. And the feeling was that the culture changed, and now instead of hard work and overachievement and grit and grind, it was some prima donnas getting all the, calling when they want to practice, when they want to play, and this and that. And it rubbed some of the old guard the wrong way. So there was a lot going on there. But Roger, you can get to a few of the specific things that got under certain players' craw, if you will.
Yeah, there were a handful of quote-unquote perks that were included in that column. Here are a few. One of them being that Kawhi and Paul George had their own personal security guards and trainers that nobody else had. Kawhi and Paul George also had power over the team's practice and travel schedules, which led some teammates to believe that Kawhi actually canceled multiple practices himself. Kawhi, we know about this one, he was allowed to live in San Diego and commute, so needless to say, he didn't quite make it on time to all of their team flights. Traffic in LA is pretty rough.
Was he taking a helicopter, wasn't he?
I don't know, but I can't be that late all the time.
But even so, he was still late. Yeah.
I'm sure there's times he didn't always have the copter. He didn't have the Kobe copter. And then number 4, not only did they mention they able to, Paul George and Kawhi, decide when they were going to practice, they also decided when they were going to play, load management. But even more specific than that, they decided if and when they were pulled in and out of games. So if they decided, I'm not going back in at the 7-minute mark, maybe the 5-minute mark is when I'll come back. So that was another issue. And then last but not least, just a complete lack of leadership. It was quoted in the article saying that if you asked all 15 players individually who the leader was, you'd get a different answer from everybody.
Well, there you have it. Rob, I think this, and I obviously want your opinion. I think this is a cautionary tale for the Brooklyn Nets. Now, I do not expect all of that to go on. I don't. It's not like Kevin Durant's going to be living in Pennsylvania and he's going to be late for flights and all that stuff, right? And I don't expect even a lot of that other stuff to go on. But it is not easy. And you and I talked about, and we thought that you got these role players who know what they are. They know they're not superstars. And, they'll play their role and welcome Kawhi and Paul George, the stars and all that, and play around them. And it didn't happen. And that's kind of what I really am getting at with the cautionary tale in Brooklyn. And we've seen Kyrie talk about, we don't need a coach. We really don't need a head coach. And, the KD's the one guy I've ever played with that I can trust. He can make the shot. One time it's going to be me. One time it's going to be him. Well, maybe one time it needs to be Joe Harris, with the shot. But I'm just saying, it's hard. Obviously, there's stars on the top teams. And like Eddie Howe said, people get that. They understand these are the guys that are going to win us the championship. But you got to be careful with making that division so pronounced between your superstars and your role players. I was around that 2008 Boston team that Eddie House played on when they won the championship with Garnett, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and they were really a team. And Kevin Garnett was a great leader, and that team, as a team, like all 15 guys, they went to Patriot games together. We were in Rome. I went with them to training camp in Rome, Italy. And they were hanging out in Rome, all 15 together. I mean, they went out of their way to make sure it wasn't just, KG, Ray, and Paul, and everybody else. I mean, obviously those are the stars, but they really embraced everybody. And that's what I would recommend to KD and Kyrie. We know you're the best players, but make sure everyone else feels included, feels like they're a valued part of the team. I mean, Kyrie talked about, coaches respecting him as a person, and that's fine. But make sure you do that same thing for your lesser teammates. And so if you do that, I think Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, Joe Harris, DeAndre Jordan's their boy, so he'll probably fit in well with them. But these guys will buy in, I think, to being the supporting cast if you do that. So I would just say, let this be a cautionary tale to the Nets that I think if they learn from it, they can be, much better off.
Yeah, I totally disagree. And I think this is typical of when something doesn't happen that was expected by people, you got to find a reason for it. It has nothing to do with all those things. I've been covering sports for 35 years. There's preferential treatment for a lot of players and stars over the years, and teams won, teams lost, whether or not they built the practice facility next to LeBron James's house in Cleveland that to make him feel like, we're doing this for you. We want you to be the most accommodated, which is fine. I have no issue with that, and I'm not blaming LeBron or blaming the Cavs for doing it. But my point is, that's not why they lost. I think it's all bogus and all BS. They lost because those guys didn't play well. And if they played just not bad, just played the way that they're capable of playing, they would have been to the Western Conference Finals. And all of this chatter and all this stuff about waiting for a flight, and that's not why they lost. They lost because Kawhi Leonard and Paul George choked. That's why they lost. And Doc Rivers didn't make the necessary adjustments when he needed to. That's the only reason. And the only reason that the Brooklyn Nets are going to lose has nothing to do with going to ball games with their teammates or making the 12th man feel like the number one man or whatever all that other stuff is if those guys make shots and those guys come and perform. If those guys do what they're supposed to do and what they're capable of doing, the Nets have a great shot to get to the finals and maybe even win one. But if they don't, they're not going to win. It's about talent. Sports is not about all that other stuff, all that window dressing and being nice to everybody and choir boys. Let's put together a choir. We got to all get together. We got to all eat together. We got to all wear the same clothes. No, none of that stuff matters. It's about who can make those baskets and make those stops when it matters in NBA playoff games. The Clippers can sell all of this and guys can write these stories and you always, I was a beat writer for years, Chris, you were too. When somebody loses, there's plenty of people to talk and point to the reasons that they lost. The reason that the Clippers did not get to where they were supposed to is because they choked. Their best players weren't good when it mattered. They were up 3-1. If this was a chemistry issue, they would have never been in that position to be up 3-1 and even have a chance. It would have derailed way longer than that. They were right where they were supposed to be, and they didn't get it done. Let's just call it what it is. It was a choke job. It wasn't a chemistry job. I'm not buying the chemistry. because that stuff just doesn't always matter. Yes, I get chemistry, Chris. And in the best possible world, you want the team to feel good about each other and everybody, yo, this is great. But the bottom line is about performing. And they didn't perform. If they performed and lost, Chris, then maybe I could buy into that chemistry issue. But you can replay those last 3 games 10 times, and there's no way Kawhi or Paul George will play as poorly as they played in those games
I don't
ever
know
again.
about Paul George.
Well, definitely
Kawhi,
Kawhi.
maybe. But here's the thing, Rob. Chemistry, and I hear you. Look, you and I, as you said, we both were beat writers for a long time. We saw teams where guys didn't get along, where guys have fights, win, right? Magic Johnson told me at times, I mean, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar didn't really talk to those guys that much. You know,
How about
he was much older. He was to himself, you know.
How about Bill
like
Laimbeer and the Bad Boys, Chris? They were fighting all the time.
But here's what I'll say to you, though, right? And those, you're right, okay? However, everybody's different. Sure, some teams, that's fine. And some leaders, that's fine. Like Jordan, we know all this story about him punching out Steve Kerr and all that stuff. And Dennis Rodman was wild and doing his own thing.
And he's in Vegas Jordan on vacation during the year, right? Then they let him go.
But Jordan was a strong enough leader to not only keep the team together in the midst of that, but he was strong enough to not let that impact his game. And he was
but
great.
Wait a minute. And then you just said it. I'm glad you said that because it was still about his ability and that Mike was that player when the game mattered. And that's a big part of keeping it together, Chris.
But he also needed, as we know, the role player. Steve Kerr hit the big shot. Jim Paxson hit the big shot. If Kerr was the type of guy to fold because Michael punched him out, maybe he doesn't hit that shot. So my point is, I agree. There are teams with the good, you mentioned the Bad Boys. You're not going to find many leaders better than Isaiah Thomas, right? Joe Dumars as well.
Yep.
Good leaders. This team does not have a leader. Kawhi, as great as he is not a leader. Wasn't the leader in San Antonio, even though he was the best player. Wasn't the leader in Toronto, even though he was the best player. Was not a leader last year with the Clippers. But they didn't have leadership to handle that situation.
But Chris,
so I think everybody's different. Some teams need more chemistry, some don't. Well, I think
was it leadership or that Kawhi played poorly?
You asked me the question. When adversity strikes, that's when you really need the chemistry. You don't need it as much when you're rolling over everybody and everything's going well. But when times get tough, if there's no chemistry or there's resentment, that's when it begins to show. With some teams, again, I said everybody's different. Some can play through it, and again, leadership is the key. Clippers didn't have the leadership. Was Kawhi going to step up and say, yo, whatever issues we got with each other off the court, that's out the window right now. Let's get down in our stances and lock these boys up. We'll deal with that other stuff later. Is he the type of dude to say that? No. And so they didn't have leadership. And that's where I think that stuff did come into play.
I don't. I still think it's about how poorly they played when they needed him. They went and got Kawhi for that exact moment to be able to close out a series, to have a guy who we saw made the big shot against Philadelphia in the Game 7. Like, he was supposed to deliver. If they didn't have any of that for the one guy you could count on.
But it wasn't just him. Lou didn't
No, but
play
he was
well.
a no-show. But in the game,
didn't play.
And
Kawhi wasn't a no-show.
In the Game 7, he was a no-show.
I mean, but the Game 5 and 6, he was fine.
No, but you got him a player of that. I'm just saying from my standpoint.
It shouldn't have even got
He was
to
a
that
no-show.
Game 7.
He was a no-show.
Let's get to the calls. Do you think what the Clippers went through, all the drama, the issues in the locker room, can be a cautionary tale for the Brooklyn Nets?
Jose in Miami, you're on the Odd Couple, Fox Sports Radio. What's up?
Hey, what's up, guys? Big fan.
Thank you, buddy.
Listen, the Clippers, they're horrible, all right? And it's because of the chemistry. Montrezl Harrell left. He got a small deal in the Lakers. He could have got more somewhere else. like we said, Kawhi is not a leader. Paul George, but
he's a leader in a different way. Some people lead by just playing, so you can't say he's a leader. He doesn't have to be a rah-rah guy.
That includes hard work on the practice court, too.
He doesn't have to be a rah-rah guy.
He didn't practice a lot. Yeah, but you got to practice.
Saying.
I'm just saying you can't just lead because you're the best player.
Yes, but some people do that. They lead by example.
I mean, but that example is practicing hard or being on time for flights. I mean, so I think Kawhi's got to grow in that area.
Glenn
go ahead. No, I thought he was. I was wondering if the caller was still there.
He was gone. Glenn in Charlotte, you're on the Odd Couple Fox Sports Radio. What's up, Glenn?
What's going on, fellas?
What's up, man?
All right, I love the show, man.
Thank you, brother.
But I have to agree in the sense of when they got there, like you said about last season with the Clippers, they played more with better chemistry because you had those role players, and at the point you didn't really have a superstar playing there. So when you look at Brooklyn, once Kyrie came there, he already turned off like
they already had issues.
And LeVert.
You're right. You're right.
So
There were stories from training camp.
Kyrie brings bad chemistry and bad energy wherever he goes. Great player, but when you like you said, unless you're playing with like a LeBron, it's not going to work with a role players that are young, and especially in this generation.
Well, it's going to be interesting because LeBron obviously is a good leader, and he was, he could play through that with Kyrie. I don't think Durant definitely ain't the leader LeBron is. So it's going to be really interesting in Brooklyn. It's going to be really interesting.
Jawan in Colorado, you're on the Odd Couple Fox Sports Radio. What's up?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good.
Hey, man. Good.
Yeah, guys, I live alone, so this is good therapy for me to vent a little bit when I come on here.
That's good. That's good.
That's what we're here for, brother.
And you know what? Nothing wrong with living alone. No headaches. You know what I'm saying? And you can watch whatever you want. Okay.
Absolutely. I appreciate that.
See?
Well, guys, I think that it absolutely should be a precautionary tale for the Brooklyn team. We used to call it prima donna syndrome. That's what my coach used to call it. I think that I got mixed feelings about Doc. I think Doc's a great coach, and I think Doc gave those guys leeway. Chris and Rob, I don't think that those guys should have taken advantage of Doc like that. So Kawhi Leonard and Paul George doing the things that they did, the missed practices, the lateness, he gave them rope. Why should they hang their coach? There's a whole lot of reasons why they should have been more supportive of Doc.
Jawan, let me just say this. Let me stop you.
He allowed that. I think I know where Rob's going. And you're right. They took advantage of it.
Okay,
but Rob,
but he's the coach,
right.
And it's under your watch. And if that's what you allowed, then you're going to wind up being the one to pay the price because they're not moving the players. And in Doc won a championship. I like him as a coach, but he's had failed situations. So you can't just say it's just Kawhi and Paul George. So what were the other reasons on the other teams?
Right, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre
come on.
Jordan.
You know what I mean? We could keep going on and
Rob,
on.
It's like if I let my kids stay up till 2 a.m. while they're, 6th graders, and then they don't do well in school, and somebody says, well, they taking advantage of their dad. They shouldn't have done that. No, it's on me for letting them stay up that late. So I'm 100, with you on that.
100%. I mean, there has to be, and if that's you're the coach, so ultimately it's on you.
So those of you who have young kids out there, don't let them stay up till 2 a.m. on school nights. I mean, that's my advice, right?
Unless they're trying to listen to Ben Maller or something. Like Ben Maller.
Even
like
then,
that's the guy.
Rob, you and I used to have to sneak on school nights to listen. I used to have the transistor radio under my pillow.
Nobody understands that, but I used to listen to fights, Chris, with a radio under my pillow.
Wow.
Like when the fights? Yes.
Because now
fights used to be
you
on
don't
the
have
radio.
the stomach for boxing now.
Well,
it's too violent for you now.
That ain't had nothing to do with it. Stop.